Yeah, if we go back across the road again, you go to Old Baldwin.
Now I remember looking at this as a kid.
There's Tamarack Creek.
I totally remember looking at this as a kid and going, wondering about Old Baldwin. Like, I wonder what's over there. Old Baldwin. The Cedar Creek Trail is a problem. Combined with the top portion of the 15-mile trail, there's almost 3,000 feet of descent on this trail. Now that's not the problem. The problem is that the only way to get to that descent is to climb back up out of the canyon you just descended into, making for an inverted ride. No one wants to climb back out the way they came. So what to do? Well, one could conceivably drive all the way around and park at the bottom of 15 Mile, but that's like a 2.5-hour drive that requires you to go all the way through the gorge and up through the dowels. So that's ridiculous. You know, a better plan is to do this 21.6 mile loop that we rode, which starts at the 8 Mile campground, climbs Lookout Mountain, then descends at Cedar Creek before climbing up Underwood and exiting on the 41 road. It's a 3-sandwich ride that climbs 3,300 feet with an equal amount of descent and provides a tour of some of the most unique and undervisited landscapes on the east side of Mount Hood. The ride starts here at this nice parking area in the 8 Mile Crossing campground, which I might add is, along with Lower 8 Mile Crossing, a fantastic place to camp. Seriously, somehow I'd failed to realize there were such nice campgrounds on this side of the mountain. This would be a fantastic place to grab a campsite before starting this ride. So, at the beginning of this ride, we jumped onto this very flat, very tame trail that leads straight out of the campground. The trail crosses a couple of roads and has a turn before coming to this intersection. There's a fire lookout out to the right up the hill, but we don't need to go to the fire lookout today. We need to turn left to complete this amazing and awe-inspiring loop. The trail remains relatively flat and uneventful for the first mile or two after the intersection. This is pretty classic 4,500 foot elevation east side forest with dry tread and some ponderosas. The forest is pretty dried out and looks kind of like a thicket. It seems like this is the kind of place that could have benefited from less fire suppression over the last century, but now it's too late and ladder fuel has piled up on the ground, and now we all just have to cross our fingers and hope that this never burns down. The tread on the trail is really flat through here. After 2.2 miles and around 750 feet of elevation gain, the trail arrives here at the Bottle Prairie Trailhead, which is also the intersection with the Lookout Mountain Trail. Take a left here and proceed across the road to begin climbing up the Lookout Mountain Trail. Now, this trail is a lot of fun on the way down, which means it is not a lot of fun to climb. During the summer, like in August, when we rode this, the dust turns into the consistency of like talcum powder. It's just dusty, it's steep, and keep your eye out for riders descending the trail. After around 2.5 miles, with another 600 feet of elevation gained through this east side forest, you'll arrive at this clearing, which is also where the Lookout Mountain Trail intersects with the 15-mile trail. This clearing is also a great spot for me to stop and talk about my Patreon supporters and how they're absolutely the best, and their contributions help me continue to make content like this. So if you're finding these reviews useful, entertaining, or both, then navigate to patreon.com/voiceovertrails to show your support today. I notice they're really adamant about the no e-bikes thing here on the 44 trails. I personally don't care if you want to ride an e-bike, but obviously they're not legal here. I like how the bike on the no e-bike sign, it looks like it has a tail. Proceed straight across the bridge to get onto the 15-mile trail. From the junction, it's about a half mile over which the trail gains 150 feet of elevation to 8 Mile Point, a flat outcropping in the middle of the woods that kind of affords pretty decent views out to Y East and out to Central Oregon. I really like how obvious it is that you're right on the dividing line between the rain-shadowed side of the Cascades and the ever-drier grass and sagebrush of North Central Oregon. On a nice, clear day, there are also fantastic views all the way up to Klickitat, Tahoma, and Lowit as well. The cool thing about the 8 Mile viewpoint is that this is also the beginning of a 2,500 foot descent, which is also pretty neat. The top 1.7 miles of this descent follow the 15-mile trail as it loses 600 feet of elevation on a relatively smooth surface that resembles pretty much anything you'd see anywhere around Bend. There are a lot of recovering clear cuts you'll ride through, as well as just plain old 44 trail style forest, which is loose, dusty, and crispy tread, as well as relatively open stands of forest that look like a poorly managed tinderbox. I mean, seriously, this forest is kind of frightening to be in on a hot, dry day. It just looks like the whole thing could go up like one giant campfire and trap you. I hope the conservationists and the timber interests can figure out how to get along and Congress can fund a solution to this before we lose all of it to a conflagration. In any case, as the descent carries on, the forest gets thicker and the trail gets twistier, two of my favorite things. I kind of ended up liking this tree tunnel effect I got riding through some of these clear cuts right before coming to this road crossing. The trail descends kind of to the south and east a bit, so the forest starts thinning out as it continues. I also noticed that the underbrush appears to be better managed here, which makes me wonder if there's been a better management regime down here in these parts of the woods. When you get to this junction, turn left. You'll get a little bit of a preview of the Cedar Creek Trail in this little transfer as things start to get a bit steeper and the trail kind of turns into a bit more of a bench as it's now located on the rim of a canyon. When you get to this junction, you'll want to turn right. It seems that Cedar Creek and 15 Mile are considered a directional couplet where if you're riding both of these trails, you're sort of supposed to descend Cedar Creek and climb back out on 15 Mile because 15 Mile is the easier climb. For the trouble, I would do anything to avoid climbing out on 15 Mile back up to the Lookout Junction after descending to the bottom of this, because then you got to climb back up out Lookout to get out of here. So that's why we're doing this loop. There is a little bit of a transfer at the top of the Cedar Creek Trail, but it's not too bad. Everything worth doing does come with a little bit of climbing. It's part of the deal. From this side of the canyon, you can see the 15 Mile trail on the other rim of the canyon, so that's kind of cool. My favorite thing about this trail is that it really lets you get a sense of the fact that you're descending into an east side canyon. After the first transfer, the trail gets really steep. This is nothing, absolutely nothing like the other 44 trails. Honestly, parts of this trail really seemed genuinely challenging to me. It goes fast and it rips. It also opens up onto these beautiful transitional meadows as the forest is gradually turning into the Central Oregon desert on this side. So not only is this trail a genuinely fun ride, but it's also one of the prettiest rides in the 44 area. These exposures are all old lava fields, by the way, in case any of y'all were interested in the geology of the place. I'm not sure if these are the lava flows that built the Cascades or if we're getting over to the flood basalts that built the Columbia Plateau, but either way, there's definitely a lot of old lava here. Keep descending and the trail keeps getting steeper, rockier, and twisty-turnier. Little by little, Cedar Creek becomes a true black trail as it descends through this soft and crispy tread. The bench becomes narrower as the hillside becomes steeper. Then, as the elevation gets lower, more and more big old ponderosas and big old hemlocks start showing up. The forest keeps opening up as the trail heads east along the rim of the canyon. This really is right on the far edge of the forest, and it's readily apparent. These are nice and fragrant woods as well. These transitional areas in Oregon and Washington are some of the loveliest places to spend time. I don't know exactly what it is about this forest, but I just love being here. Maybe it has something to do with some of my happier adolescent memories. More on that in a minute. These meadows really do open up nicely. I bet this area is downright verdant earlier in the summer when there's still moisture in the soil. But even when they're brown, there's just a certain kind of unique beauty to these meadows that's undeniable. Everything just gets super cruisy through here. Cruisy and rocky. It's like if Whistler and Phil's Trail had a baby, this is what you'd end up with. A decent downhill grade, lots of crispy tread with dust in it and rocks poking through. The only difference being that the rocks are made out of lava instead of granite, but those are just minor details. Eventually, the trail approaches this exposure along the other side of the ridgeline, the rim of an adjacent canyon to the one that was on the left. This is where the trail gets really spicy. The trail drops away and gets a lot looser with more rocks exposed in the surface, providing a relatively rare treat for this side of the mountain. Genuine chunder. Then the trail crosses a bridge over 15 Mile Creek. That's it. This is the bottom of the ride and the end of the shredding descent. This is a fantastic spot for backcountry camping, by the way, so if you're looking for a nicely forested backpacking or bikepacking spot, this location has nice flat spots to set up a tent and access to water from the creek. It's a great place to eat your second sandwich as well because there's a pretty big climb ahead to get back out of this canyon. I said earlier that the route I'd be talking about in this video avoids the climb up 15 Mile to get back out of here. That doesn't mean there isn't still like quite a lot of climbing. It's just that it happens on a different trail. The Underhill Trail, which gains 1,100 feet with 350 feet of downhill interspersed over 3.3 miles on its way up to the 44 road. The Underhill Trail is where this ride gets super interesting. That's not to say it wasn't already interesting before, just that it's even more interesting now. It's also really steep for the next 2.5 miles, but the forest over here is just the coolest. It has a very different character than the woods on the other side of the canyon, with bigger trees here at the bottom and more variation in the landscape. The forest floor is a lot different, with the underbrush being made up of mostly grassland as opposed to bushes and smaller trees. It's a very transitional forest over here. As far as the trail goes, well, it's steep. This trail also clearly doesn't get many wheels on it, as the tread is soft, grassy, and crispy. Seriously, the views from this trail are really quite lovely. The openness on this rim of the canyon is remarkable. I don't think I've quite seen a unique landscape like this anywhere else. There are a couple of switchbacks on this really steep climb that will require dismounting from the bike to navigate them. But that's okay, because the forest and the views just keep getting better and better, so I certainly didn't mind. It really starts to feel downright Central Oregon-like up here as the trees continue to thin out and there's more balsam root and whatever those super fragrant bushes are. There's grass on the ground and the soil is dusty. It's just so darn, I don't know, it's transitional. Take a left on this road and then take a right to get back onto the trail, which is even less well-traveled up here than it was down at the bottom. This is the section where the trail loses 350 feet over 3/4 of a mile. It's kind of rocky and a little bit tricky in here. It might feel a little like you're off course, but it's really actually not a problem. You are on the route. The woods are thicker up here, showing the evidence of a bit more moisture at this slightly higher elevation. The tread is crunchy and soft, just like any other lightly traveled trail on the east side of Mount Hood National Forest. These are some deep, dark woods, at least in comparison to where the trail starts. Eventually, we came across this cool little footbridge with a collapsed building and an old horse corral on the other side. I think this little piece of weirdness is part of what's referred to as Old Camp Baldwin, something we heard about but weren't sure actually existed when I went to Boy Scout camp near here. I'm not sure why I know it, but I just know that all this stuff in here has to be remnants of something the Boy Scouts were involved in. It just has the look of something the Boy Scouts would have done, kind of given the overall behavior of the organization, as I understand it. There are these stairs here, which you don't need to bother with because there's a perfectly good switchback in the trail. These totally have all the trappings of being someone's Eagle project. There's just something about this that absolutely screams Boy Scout make work service project. Eventually, this climbs up a pretty steep hill and out to this road here. From the road, you can go up this trail over here and keep climbing up a slight incline through more kind of unmemorable transitional forest until the trail approaches this trailhead, which has an interpretive sign that provides a history of what's going on with this kind of weird trail in the first place.
These 160 acres were donated to the Forest Service by Mrs. Adeline Underhill in memory of her husband, Ned Underhill. In the early 1930s, Ned Underhill operated a small mill on this site. It has many opportunities for study and reminiscence. Other mill sites, past forest fires, and logging activities offer interesting comparison of their effects on the forest community.
Kind of makes the whole thing sort of make sense. From the Underhill trailhead, we pedaled out to the 44 road, which is what makes this a 44 trail, of course. It's nice and nicely paved up here. Now, unless you want to see the scout camp, just stay on the 44 road and ride back to the campground where your car is parked. In my case, though, I wanted to take a look at Camp Baldwin, the Boy Scout camp up here, because I wanted to see if it still looked anything like I remembered it when I was a kid. My scout troop went here on 2 different years when I was a kid, and just being here in this area kind of brought a wave of nostalgia flooding back to me. That's why these woods are special to me, because some of my first experiences spending extended time in the outdoors happened in these woods. I should mention that this camp is private land and it's a working camp, so I am actually trespassing here. I was comfortable doing it as it was a Sunday night in late August and there were no scouts present. If there had been people using the camp, there's no way I would have felt comfortable riding my bike around here. There is a host on site. The facility is supervised. It seems unlikely that they didn't know I was here in some way. Anyway, this was where I went to scout camp when I was 12 and 14 years old. I didn't earn my Eagle Scout or even Tenderfoot for that matter, but I sure did have fun at scout camp. The whole thing, swimming in the ridiculously cold lake, singing camp songs, catching squirrels with a box propped up by a stick, watching Mark Johnson get bit by the squirrel we caught when he tried to pick it up, peeing in the campfire. These were important, formative moments from my adolescence, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I did manage to find our old campsite, and it was, well, not like I remember it at all. Camp Baldwin is located in the middle of the forest, and a lot can and did change in 26 years. They've gone soft on kids these days, letting them have cabins with solid walls instead of terrible cotton canvas wall tents with holes in them. Now how are they supposed to shiver through the night in a wet sleeping bag every time it rains? You know, I just realized we didn't even have internet service at my parents' house when I was going to scout camp here. Well, that's enough reminiscing about something that happened more years ago than the age I was when I graduated college. Time just keeps marching on. We followed the signs to the Lower Crossing campground over some chewed up horse trail, but really you can just take the road if you want to. Just follow the GPS track posted in the description because the turns were kind of complicated. The best way to get back to 8 Mile Campground is actually just to follow the gravel roads, but you can explore whatever you want here. Anyway, when we found ourselves at the Lower Crossing campground, we jumped onto this really lovely, nicely graded trail that connects Lower Crossing to 8 Mile. It's called the 8 Mile Interpretive Trail, and it's just a little under a mile long. Seriously, these campgrounds are like the perfect place to just chill out in the woods. And there we have it. Dropped right back where we started, 21 miles and 3,300 feet of elevation gain later. This is probably some of the best exploring I've done on this side of the mountain. I'll be coming back for sure. I noticed there were a lot of snow parks over here. I'm going to have to come back and check those out in the winter. So did you ever go to scout camp? What about Camp Baldwin? Or, what's your favorite 44 trail? Let me know in the comments. I'd also like to take this moment to thank all my Patreon supporters, especially my Loamy Goodness level sponsors, Andy Suri, Charles Kim, Damon Corey, Randy Relaford, and Ty Morgan Marbit. I'd also like to thank my Hero Dirt level sponsors earning their mention at the end of this video, Bryce Ulrich, Heather Van Valkenburg, Jason Moore, and Pedro Cantarini. Also, if you're one of my Loamy Goodness level sponsors, I need you to check your messages in Patreon for some secret benefits I'd like to offer you. Just keep an eye out. You'll see, it'll be fun. If you'd like to join this list of illustrious folks supporting some of the best trail commentary on the internet, navigate to patreon.com/voiceovertrails and contribute. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, get out there and go ride your bike.